Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ESW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observe It combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observeit.com/securityweekly. Skeleton keys, golden tickets, forged packs, DC Sync, DC Shadow. The Active Directory attack surface is expanding faster than admins can keep up with. Securing your environment begins with implementing least privilege administrative models, but does not end there. Many organizations send Active Directory syslog events to a SIM platform. However, logs are noisy, of limited scope, and are time-consuming to review and act upon. Active Directory is secure when it's clean, understood, configured properly, monitored closely, and controlled tightly. StealthBits technologies provide solutions that monitor, secure, and detect the latest threats against Active Directory. Visit them today at stealthbits.com to learn more. Are you looking for high-performance data storage that's easy to use yet secure enough for the Department of Defense? Look no further. Racktop Systems gives business software-defined data storage complete with embedded compliance, security, and data encryption. Don't let cyber threats, regulatory demands, or the complexity and growth of your data overwhelm your business. Racktop's high-performance data management platform gives you the tools you need to address the most demanding data challenges. Think beyond storage. To learn more, visit racktopsystems.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. This is the Enterprise Security News for this week. I want to lead off, John, and talk about the funding rounds from CrowdStrike and Cylance, respectively. Cylance has raised $120 million in funding. CrowdStrike has just secured a $200 million funding round, which are big rounds. Big rounds.
They're huge. Also, look at who actually invested in them, right? You got Blackstone Tactical Opportunities, which Blackstone doesn't, they tend to be very picky about who they invest in. But then also Google or Alphabet was involved in this as well. And I think that was CrowdStrike that had Google in theirs as well. So what I wanted to kind of get from you is this becoming a race to see who gets bought first by what company? Or do you think that this is a signal that these particular companies are now in it for the long haul? They believe in the products. They're not looking for an exit strategy that's pure getting bought out. They're going to continue moving on as independent companies to basically continue competing head to head with McAfee and Symantec.
Yeah, it may be too early to say. So looking at CrowdStrike, they've taken $465 million. And so their latest round was a Series E at $200 million. And then let's look at Cylance and see what their funding history is, because I haven't looked at it in a while. They're $297 million, with their Series E being $120 million. So they've taken on less funding. CrowdStrike, based on the amount of funding that they've taken on, they very well are more likely to have an exit that is public. They're going to go public. Mm-hmm. Cylance could still potentially be acquired. It'll be interesting to see. When I saw this, John, I was like, "What? These two companies are raising ridiculous amounts of money. They're direct competitors of each other. Like, at what point does one buy the other, or they merge, or maybe not? I'm not sure. Or does one get acquired by a larger company? I mean, at this level of maturity and funding and probably revenue as well, the list of companies that can afford to buy that is,
smaller
starting to shrink,
and smaller.
Right? Like now you're basically left with Microsoft, Google, Symantec, maybe a CA.
I don't think these would be sold back to McAfee, though. I can't see that. It's being the fact that they kind of came out of McAfee.
It'd be interesting to see how. I don't know how much cash a McAfee or one of those other. I think if a McAfee or a Symantec, excuse me, were going to buy one of these companies, they probably would have already done so. Maybe
Yeah.
they tried. I mean, a lot of that happens. People try and buy other companies. I hear about that all the time. I don't have any insider knowledge in this case, but it'd be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't know what does it mean for people working in the enterprise today? Is it? I think it's business as usual right now. It's too early to make any decisions on your enterprise based on this, perhaps.
I think it is too early, but I also tell a lot of my customers so I break my customers up into 3 separate tiers whenever I'm on IANS calls. The top tier are basically best of breed at all times. We have the staffing, we have the money, we're willing to make it happen. And with those companies, I recommend like a CrowdStrike or a Cylance. Usually Cylance because we see them a lot more. We don't see CrowdStrike as much. But Cylance seems to be the one that I hear a lot of people having good, positive, warm, fuzzy feelings about. Those people are rare. They're kind of in that unicorn category. Now, you take one step down, you have organizations that are running Symantec, they're running McAfee, and they want to get into this space. And with them, I'm telling them to hold on. And the reason why is, and I said this a number of times, what Cylance and what CrowdStrike is doing is not something that's completely and utterly unique. The big players like your McAfee and like Symantec are going to be doing about 85-90% of what these companies are doing right now, the CrowdStrikes and the Cylances, very, very shortly. In fact, they've already got service offerings to compete with it. So if you're happy with your existing technology provider, but you would like this kind of artificial intelligence, machine learning, heuristic-based malware protection, your existing vendor is going to be bringing that in the door very, very, very quickly. In a lot of ways, they already have. So I'm telling that big middle group, just stay, wait before you actually start making decisions. Because when you rip out those products, you're not just basically just replacing a blacklist AV. With McAfee and Symantec, you have DLP hooks, you have host-based firewall hooks. There's so many other things that are with that package. And you got to figure out how to backfill all those different holes that can exist from that vendor.
The rip and replace cost is too high. What you're saying is the rip and replace cost is too high. There's not enough value and benefit to make the switch.
You're absolutely correct. That is the point. There's just not enough value.
Unless you're a small shop, maybe that can do that really easily. I don't think you can just say a small shop, because a small shop that doesn't have the capability to swap out that software at scale, even though it's a small scale, probably not. But if you're really good at your patch management, configuration management of all your systems, then maybe it is worth it to make that switch.
Possibly. Yeah. But then you have all these other things to fill in. And, years ago, Paul, we always used to talk like on regular Security Weekly, like what is the best product? And I think I've gotten older and I'd like to think wiser. But now I'm starting to look at it from a more holistic perspective, that I've seen organizations that try to be at the pointy end of the spear, rip and replace, and it doesn't go well most of the time unless they actually fully commit to it.
Right.
So that's just my take on this space. But yeah, this is interesting because now you were talking about CrowdStrike possibly going public. I can absolutely see that's where they're headed. Cylance maybe going public, but then again getting bought. That both of those could happen as well.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say, just based on funding. And Michael and Matt are more of the experts, and we'll probably next week on Business Security Weekly, cover that in more detail. Michael has the stats and the information about, like, as companies take on funding rounds, how that positions them for going public versus getting bought and things like that. I don't remember the exact details there, but Michael will cover that. Certainly on Monday. So
we'll check that out then.
What else we got?
Can I jump to another funding one?
Yeah.
One that really struck me as interesting is SafeBreach. They've got a 15 million round. That's kind of interesting. What was really interesting in the article is they started talking about their patents. And when SafeBreach first came out, they basically were talking about automating penetration tests.
Yeah.
And
so I want to go back to that, John. Their messaging was different. And when we covered it, they were really messaging on what it sounded like to us, whether it was true or not. But what it sounded like in their messaging was, in their positioning, they're like, we're going to replace your pen test. And we were like, yeah, no. And that's kind of why we had the commentary that we did on SafeBreach. However, since then,
I think some of their employees, also full disclosure, some of their employees did hunt us down, and they were extremely frustrated. And we did have conversations with some of them about this too.
We did. So hopefully that's water under the bridge. Yeah. And now, but the marketplace has changed, and the messaging and positioning has changed. Now they're an attack simulation company, which back then when we first covered SafeBreach, dude, I feel like wasn't even a category.
Yes.
And I hope that in my advice to SafeBreach and the probably half a dozen or more other companies in this category today that they're fighting to be the category king. And I want to see one of these, the best vendor, emerge as the category king and solidify this as a budget line item in everyone's organization. That's how much I believe in this new category. I wasn't sold when they're like, we're going to replace pen testing. I'm like, I don't, it very well could have, but I didn't see it at the time. I still don't see that today. Since then, we've had a lot of conversations. In fact, when we had Dave and Adrian on, right, we talked at length about that, and Jeff as well, about how all these fit in your organization. I firmly believe that attack simulation fits in your organization and is a critical part of your security architecture today.
And it's basically, so let's talk about the messaging, right? So SafeBreach's messaging is now basically taking threat intelligence and then turning that into actions that can then be tested in your organization. That's amazing, right? We're not trying to write signatures for individual threat actors. We're looking at their tactics, and we're trying to basically automate that across the organization and see how the organization responds. And they're also now talking about empowering red teams, going back to, do you want your red team manually testing all of the techniques in the MITRE ATT&CK framework, or do you want a product that actually goes through and automates a tremendous amount of that MITRE ATT&CK framework so that they can then focus on other harder things? That is a much better sell. That is fantastic. And the fact that they have the patents for this, if somebody is looking for an investment opportunity in a company, really SafeBreach, the fact that they have the patents, the fact that they've shifted their messaging to be something that more tightly aligns to make sense, not trying to go and make bloody noses of the pen testing community, but now talking about how to empower red teams, how to take threat intelligence and actually make it something useful, rather than having an analyst sitting there and writing atomic indicators of compromise for every IOC that they see coming across the wire. Now we're starting about talking about something that is going to provide tremendous value to organizations. So it's amazing how this company has shifted since we first started talking to them to where we're talking about them now.
And we're talking about them in a very positive light, which you got to stay tuned for the show, because you never know how everything is changing, right? I mean, there could be things that we talked about and we're like, we really like this, and maybe that's changed or pivot. You know, something in the industry has changed, something in the threat landscape has changed, and now we're like, yeah, no, that's not the thing anymore. So that's what makes our jobs interesting, John. Just one thing, right?
Well, and it's nice to see things change. Hopefully, maybe a little bit based on what we've talked about on the show too.
So Trend Micro is extending into container security, which is interesting, right? Like, are they?
Everybody's going into containers. Yes.
Yeah, but like, are they pivoting? They've got some interesting acquisitions lately too. If you look at Trend Micro, what were they? It was interesting. What they were buying.
While you're pulling that up, this is absolutely, like, what was it Chris was talking about the other day? You used to look at your entire security architecture as like a farm, right? You take these servers, you would love these servers, you would care for these servers, you would nurture these servers. And now whenever you're talking about container security and you're talking about DevOps, it's basically like, yep, that particular service or that server isn't working. You take it out, shoot it, and then redo it. And that's a very, very huge shift in the way that we're looking at cloud-based infrastructures, the way that we're looking at DevOps or secure DevOps, which some people would say there is no difference between DevOps and secure DevOps, because DevOps should have security baked into it. And I still say, Paul, I know you're typing away furiously, but I still don't think that there's somebody in this area right now that owns this space completely. Like we talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, we talk about like Cylance and CrowdStrike every single episode. They have that mind share, right? I don't think anybody has gotten that point right now for container security. There's a lot of vendors and a lot of products that are entering that space, but I still don't think we have a very, very, very clear, definitive leader in this space yet at all.
Yeah, they bought Immunio, which was kind of like, I'll call a next generation web application security company. And so they seem to be playing more in the space. So I see the space still separate, right? You still need something to monitor your web applications, and then you need something to monitor your IT operations environment, which largely now is going to be made up of containers. How you deploy those containers, on-premise, cloud, or serverless, is going to change. In fact, Twistlock had an announcement, container security company, they're embracing serverless, right? Because that's becoming more and more of an option that companies are going to. So it's interesting that Trend Micro is going into this newer space of the newer players. They just bought a newer player in the web app space, and now are hitting the operation space with containers. I'd say the other space that's kind of in front of that too is the software security space, right? Some kind of static analysis or dynamic analysis or some kind of test suite that's targeted at the developers. I truly believe that there's going to be a very solidified space in security that you're going to worry about focusing on the development side of that. You're going to worry about the continuous integration, continuous development, and IT operations side with DevOps and containers. And serverless is going to play into that as well. You're also going to have to apply some security to your web application. So it's interesting how all these pieces could potentially fit together.
Well, and a lot of these vendors like Trend, I think that they understand if they're not playing in all of those spaces, there's going to be some kind of upstart that specializes in those places that's going to come and start taking their business. Like Twistlog. Twistlog seems to be one that we talk about quite a bit.
Yep.
I think right now they're probably more positioned than just about anybody in the space to become that leader. But dang, it seems like every week there's a new product that's like, oh, we now integrate with Kubernetes. It's like, well, okay.
Yeah. And so Matt Alderman works for Layered Insight, and they're also a sponsor of ours as well. And their technology is solid, dude. I mean, Matt went to work there, right? I mean, that's the, like good by association. Like, when you're good people go work, for those startups, that's a really good indication. And, Matt's analysis of the market, Matt being a host on the show and a friend and all aside, their approach to container security is solid. Their people are solid. Now, I'm sure the other companies have solid people as well, but those pieces are in place for Layered Insight. StackRox is another player. We've had them on the show as well. It's a very interesting space to follow. Application Security Weekly covers that space
it's
in depth.
New. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the same crap we were doing 15, 20 years ago. It's really exciting. And at BHIS, we're actually shifting for a lot of our testers because they've tapped out for training, be it for SANS or OSCP or whatever. We're now shifting them into these cloud-based technologies. So they're starting to get trained in these areas because if you're in pen testing right now, just pro tip, if you're a company and you're not starting to look into these technologies, you're about to get burnt out of the industry very, very, very quickly.
What I think would be an interesting project, John, and I'll throw this out there because I just know I'm not going to have time for it. When you're a penetration tester and you've signed a contract, you're going to test this company, right? You have to build infrastructure that's temporary for your testing. And that's really regardless of, whether it's not even a pen test, but a vuln scan all the way up to, the most advanced pen test that maybe is going to take 6 months. You have to build infrastructure on the fly. There is no better technology today available to that, for that rather than containers. And if you extend that out into serverless, there's not a whole lot of infrastructure and all that stuff can be scripted. And I think that would be an interesting project to provide a framework to create temporary pen test environments using containers and have it all scripted.
Yeah, and I think we picked up we just got an offer. Like, we're talking about unicorns, right? So we just hired a unicorn. I can't go public with who this unicorn is, but he's actually got an entire project dedicated to standing up that type of infrastructure. And I mean, you saw this research from Salesforce before a lot of the people got fired in Meat Pistol. And a lot of the other products. There are some like steps to doing that, but I think I would agree. I don't think that anybody's actually gone that full all the way through to get it completely automated quite yet.
Yeah, and Carrie Roberts gave a technical segment on similar to that, right? Basically spinning up AWS instances to proxy your traffic through to
proxy
do scanning.
cannon.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that was right along the lines, right? And we talk about hunting for bug bounties, which we talked about last week. Yeah, I think that's useful if you're doing, bug bounty hunting as well. And, you don't want your IP to get blacklisted. And then, so what other infrastructure can you create? And in fact, Keith Hoodlet's working on automating a lot of that, a lot of the information gathering phase of identifying targets in applications. And he's working on automating that as well. So I think there's going to be some cool stuff coming out and how it can help pen testers. Yeah,
and we're just getting started. I think so our one of our tools that we released is called Cred King, that allows you to use Amazon Lambda for password spraying against Google. And that idea can actually be stood up. So you're no longer standing up a server, you're actually hooking into Lambda instances, spinning them up to run the attacks. And the future is going to be interesting because I can't see Amazon finding out about that and being like, yeah, this sounds cool. Keep going, guys.
Sure.
Or Google looking at it and saying, yeah, we love getting password sprayed from Amazon. So it's going to become a very interesting and dynamic space over the next few years. So at any rate, we're digressing. But yes, this container security and everything, that's where we're trying to move a lot of our resources into developing better understanding on how to test them. So you got to get caught up on it as well.
AI and machine learning. Was that a machine learning story? I definitely had Sophos adds AI to improve its email security solution. That was like a headline. I thought there was a machine learning. Oh, Fortinet optimizes a WAF, web application firewall, with new machine learning capabilities. There's an audience question that says, where do you see machine learning in the field of cybersecurity? Is there an intersection between these two fields? Absolutely. If I can remember the person's name, we interviewed a data scientist on Security Weekly from Endgame.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back in the archives and look at that, I'm blanking on his name, and people are probably screaming at me.
Well, and machine learning. While you're trying to remember the name, let's talk about what machine learning is really, really, really good for. Right now, a lot of the security technologies are trying to find evil. But really what we should be focusing on in the industry is trying to define and baseline what normal is, and then identifying deviations and anomalies from that type of normalcy.
Hiram Anderson, episode 504 of Paul Security Weekly.
Got it.
We interviewed Hiram. He's a data scientist, works for Endgame, and talked about specifically the audience question of where's the intersection of machine learning and security. Artificial intelligence was also discussed in that interview as well, and there's certainly intersections with both. And obviously, a lot of companies are messaging on them. I'm not sure. It can be just a buzzword, right? Sure, AI could improve email security, and machine learning could improve your WAF, but really, I don't.
So let's talk about how machine learning can be used in this context, right? So if most of your traffic falls into specific category sets of, normal user traffic, and then all of a sudden somebody starts throwing a ton of union selects, that is a deviation. So if you can cluster and identify the norm, and that's what machine learning and artificial intelligence can help out with, it helps you identify those anomalies faster.
In fact, so I absolutely that's exactly, pretty much exactly how Signal Sciences works.
Yep.
And they do an awesome job at that. And they really are just looking at HTTP requests and responses and applying really smart machine learning to that to give you visibility into security and or maybe performance or other things that are useful to monitoring your application. So it's awesome. And
that ties into Fortinet and Sophos, the two stories on artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so here I think we see larger companies going, oh, we can do that too.
Yeah. Oh, can I talk about ForeScout?
Yeah.
So this is, Internet of Things stuff. So embedded device, that's kind of your area. But this is one of those, whenever I read it, I was like, holy crap, ForeScout is absolutely perfectly positioned for this. I mean, they hate to be called a NAC provider, network access control provider. They really, really hate that. But hey, that's what they are. So they basically allow you to hook into the switch level and get that type of visibility at the switch when identify an asset and tie that asset to an individual. And then any of the access control associated with that asset and that individual will follow that individual wherever they are. And, you're going to be plugging in your ICS equipment, your PLCs and things like that into a switch. Might as well be a switch that's running ForeScout to have some type of protection on it. Because, Paul, we've talked about many, many, many times, whenever it comes to like SCADA security testing, basically most people have a rule of don't touch it. Ever. So it makes it hard to do vulnerability analysis, makes it hard to do remediation. And ForeScout being hooked in at the switch level, I think is just a really, really good play. And I'm wondering what the hell took them so long to actually start doing this.
Yeah, I wonder if the problem's big enough, though, right?
Oh, good question.
Is the IoT problem? I mean, certainly in ICS, the problem. I mean, it is much of the problem in ICS, right? But when you go out to the enterprise, I've seen a lot of companies try and solve a problem with IoT that largely people don't think they have, and maybe they don't have. Maybe on the risk scale, it's just not as important as your endpoint protection, as analyzing your NetFlow data and detecting indicators of compromise and all those other activities. So I foresee ForeScout struggling with this messaging if they're taking it to the enterprise. They might have some luck in ICS, but as John, you and I and many of our listeners know, there are many ICS-specific vendors that are doing some amazing things.
They are. And I think that the people that are in the ICS space, like you talk about, is the space big enough? And I would say no. However, the other question that needs to be asked is, are the people that are in the ICS space willing to pay for that expertise? Right. And knowing Rob M. Lee for years and the company Dragos, they're doing very, very, very well. But the people that are looking for those specific solutions, they know what their problem statement is, and they are willing to pay for the solutions in that space. Like Dragos is absolutely one of those solution providers.
What else we got this week? It was a lot of good stories this week.
We're kind of running down.
I wanted to mention DigiStart, they're a sponsor on Paul Security Weekly. They've joined the Sovereign Foundation as the founding steward.
What the hell is that?
I asked the same question. I should have put the link in there. And I'm sure we'll get more clarification on this announcement. The Sovereign Foundation is a private sector international nonprofit that was established to govern the world's first self-governing identity network. Pretty cool. Hadn't heard of that. Going to research it some more. But that was an announcement from one of our sponsors, so wanted to make sure we covered that. And I think that
we did talk about Twistlock already. Yep. You mentioned their serverless stuff.
ExtraHop. That was the one we were missing.
Yes, Reveal X.
What is this? A new network bar for network traffic analytics at enterprise scale. Sounds cool.
Yes.
I want network traffic analytics at enenterprise scale. I don't know what that means, but it sounds cool.
Analytics at enterprise scale.
I know what it means, but it's provocative.
Well, and it looks beautiful. Like, it really looks like you just want to lick it.
Maybe.
Yeah, but is that actually a product that, just because it looks cool, that you actually want to purchase? I think that there's good visualizations and there's bad visualizations, and then there's pretty visualizations. In the Venn diagram, sometimes they all overlap. And this product looks very, very cool, kind of tying towards NetFlow and IPFix and what we were talking about earlier, and having that level of visibility is important. So very, very, very cool, looking cool. And I think they are a direct competitor to Darktrace, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it could be.
I'm not sure,
but
I think they are.
So
they're in the same space.
Yeah, that much on the show. So.
Yep.
Interesting. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching Enterprise Security Weekly. John, thank you so much. That rounds out the show for today. Thank you for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.